Sports video games was a concept I really couldn't understand for years. If you like baseball so much, why would you play a baseball video game instead of just going outside and playing baseball? It'd be like if they had a competitive Smash Bros. Melee video game where you play as characters like Mewtwo King and Hungrybox, instead of just playing Melee. Of course, this is a flawed and unpopular perspective, as evidenced by the high sales numbers for sports games. Sega Sports played a major role in how successful Genesis was in the US.
Oh, how far did we go to understand the players? Maybe too far.
Basketball and football titles were among its top sellers.
What do you see?
When you play a good one, it's captivating and can be fun with friends. Even non-sports fans like me could enjoy a quick game of worldwide soccer. But when us filthy casuals play a bad one, like NHL All-Star Hockey, the poor quality is noticed.
Wow, my favorite pasta shape.
It's September 29th, 1995.
Cowabunga, dude, you've seen me before, but you never met a tastier dinosaur.
The Saturn has yet to capitalize on either of the two top-selling sports. It has bad hockey game, decent soccer, and Stadler-rific golf.
Yummy, mouth-watering titles.
Instead of basketball and football, Sega is aiming for the heart, using a sport that's captivated Americans for a century. 1995 was an interesting and different time for North American baseball. The season started late, right after the infamous Major League Baseball strike of 1994.
There's an incredible amount of sadness.
It marked the first cancellation of the World Series. The strike forced the MLB to abruptly end its season.
This is how baseball's 125th season ended, by fax.
We didn't want a strike, we didn't want this to happen, but we don't have no other choice.
With fans robbed of their championship game, many turned to the golden age of the NBA. The show had a lot of bases to cover if it wanted to catch casual sports fans again. It's a different ballpark across the Great Pacific. In Japan, baseball rivals sumo wrestling as the island nation's most popular sport. Stands are always packed. One of their players, Hideo Nomo, signed on to play for the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1995. It made the MLB marketable to the land of the rising sun. To capitalize on this, Sega of Japan started making Hideo Nomo World Series Baseball for the Saturn. It's worth noting this is unrelated to World Series Baseball. That's a 1994 American-developed baseball game for the Genesis and Game Gear. Sega of America worked to localize the game, referring to it as Grand Slam Baseball. Marketing eventually changed that decision. SOA released World Series Baseball in North America. Since May of '95, it had a projected release date of September, and it made that goal, coming out on the 29th. This is commonly confused with the separate 1996 32X game World Series Baseball starring Deion Sanders, a continuation of the Genesis game World Series Baseball. Not to be confused with World Series Baseball, a 2001 Sega arcade game. It's worth noting that's not the same as World Series Baseball, a 2002 Xbox game published by Sega but developed by Visual Concepts. The Genesis lineup got sequels like World Series Baseball 96 from the same team that made World Series Baseball. But remember, World Series Baseball 2 for the Saturn is separate, produced by the same Sega team that made the console's first World Series Baseball. Despite the original production name Grand Slam Baseball, Grand Slam for the Sega Saturn is a completely different game done by Burst Studios. Did you take notes? With real players, multiple stadiums, and easy controls, World Series Baseball on the surface seems like it might be one of the good ones, but you don't have to take my word for it.
Psych!
Now we turn to good friend and PandaMonium sports correspondent, Tito. Hello, Tito.
Hey, Panda, I'm just glad to be here.
Alright, me too. I'm not a huge sports fan, nor am I familiar with 90s sports video games. Tito is. This man took the top spot at one of our local NBA Jam tournaments. Not only does he actually enjoy this stuff, he's legitimately familiar with 90s sports history.
Let's slide over to the Twins. Puckett in the outfield. That's good. Mahomes. Fun fact. That's actually Patrick Mahomes Sr.
Okay.
The father of Pat Mahomes.
We sat down to play a few rounds of World Series baseball while I dissected his impressions and takeaways. One of the first things he noticed was the inclusion of real major league players.
They have the official rosters, which would be a big selling point for a lot of mid-90s sports games. That wasn't necessarily the standard back then.
Having for real ballers isn't the only real-life reflection.
Okay, so it has all their stats. That's another big selling point. A lot of the 94 numbers might seem like low. It's important to remember there was a strike in 1994 that shortened the season.
When looking through the options, we noticed many of the basic adjustments are present, but one thing does stick out.
The designated hitter is a player that hits for the pitcher. Okay. They don't play the field at all, but they hit for the pitcher. Only games hosted in American League stadiums use the designated hitter. So it's really interesting that it's either on or off rather than AL only.
After we finished diving deep into the lore, it became time to go outside, get some exercise, have some fun.
So the Braves should be very good. The Expos should be good. This is one of the few times in history they were ever good.
As expected, all teams of the time are here.
Seattle's really good at this point. This would be a nice little matchup.
You get 4
ultra-realistic
diamonds to pick from, again, representing real life.
Fenway is kind of interesting. You'll notice that the left field wall is very, very, very tall. It's called the Green Monster. It's also very shallow. So a lot of times balls will hit off of it because it's so tall.
This ball is off the monster.
Astrodome is just classic because it's domed. Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs, and then Yankee Stadium, of course. This is the house that Ruth built.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like the classic place to play baseball.
Yeah, one thing you'll notice is, look at the corners, 314 feet, 318 feet. That's an easy home run. Let's start with Wrigley.
Right away, we're greeted by what appears to be digitized, flat-facing sprites on a 3D rendered field. It looks alright. Ears are graced with real-time announcing.
No balls and 1 strike.
The announcer's pretty good.
Now batting, Darren Bragg.
He belts out the name of the more popular baseball players. Not everybody got the announcer treatment.
Jeff Nelson. Randy Johnson is here. One of the all-time greats. The big unit, as it were. 6'10".
Wow.
I wonder, he should have a mullet in this game. Like the average stepdad is Charmander, he's the Charizard of stepdads. That's what he looks like.
A few of the players appear to be realistic representations, like the titular Hideo Nomo.
No balls and 1 strike.
Others don't.
We have Randy Johnson, 6'10", with a mullet, with a mustache, with a very distinct batting stance, and he looks like Alex Rodriguez there.
I feel like he should look a little more S-tier stepdad.
He should look like a fully digivolved stepdad.
Controls were pretty easy to pick up. Batters move around their box with the D-pad.
Griffey, alright, you better be careful here.
Holding C swings the bat.
You do have the opportunity to bunt with Z. You can even drag your bunt.
He squares to bunt.
So if you tap the swing button, he just does the first part of his swing, and you can do a little jig. This guy's thick. What's wrong, Greg Maddox-kun? Are you distracted by my nuggies? Some dances are cooler than others.
Pro Panda Tip. If you start in the far corner and move diagonally toward the ball while swinging the bat,
Ground ball through the infield.
it seems to work better.
Ground ball through the infield.
Pitching is also done with C.
No balls and 1 strike.
By holding the D-pad, you can throw it at different speeds and even curve it.
Down in C. That's the fastball.
Nice.
So it's not super realistic because you can break the pitch left or right.
Okay.
For a left-handed pitcher, it'd be almost impossible to break a pitch that way.
No balls and 1 strike.
From the batting perspective, seeing what kind of pitch it is can be difficult. We both had a pretty hard time hitting fast and slow balls.
Slow ball. Oh. That was not a slow ball.
The animation for each pitch type look very similar right up until the ball gets off the mound.
Right there on the fringe of the dirt, that's kind of when it slows down.
I did find one easy way to predict the pitch. Only works in 2-player matches.
And 1 strike. 1 strike. Strike 3. He gets out of a jam.
PandaMonium's in the lead.
Look at the pitcher.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Using the shoulder buttons, you can
change his position.
Yeah.
No outs with a runner on first.
Oh, you can hit him.
I will admit, I forgot that I was batting and not pitching.
Fielding seemed to be somewhat problematic.
He makes the play.
Fielding isn't super intuitive at this point. When I was out in the field, I felt like it was hard to judge where the ball was going to go.
Okay.
And grounders just come at you too fast.
Through the legs.
You don't have a way to select which player you're controlling. It automatically defaults to whoever is closest to the ball. This is probably a good thing. When throwing, I was tempted to use the D-pad to aim where I wanted the ball to go, but it actually works by holding the base you want to throw to.
The throw to second.
Players can get used to this mechanic, as long as the lack of speed doesn't bother you.
I feel like you don't have a ton of reaction time to it, and your players are a little slow.
You can lead off a base by repeatedly pressing L. Use the D-pad to straight up steal a base.
The runner goes.
Base running is very hard here.
Yeah.
I'm glad that the base running is a little slower to compensate for the fact that your fielders are pretty slow too.
Now batting.
The Rhino.
What earned him that nickname?
His name is Ryan.
Oh, okay. He's not the villain from Spider-Man?
No.
Dang.
From here, we began to notice and experiment with the quirks of World Series Baseball's presentation.
Okay, this is cool.
Okay, that's a different camera.
The random camera stuff, that's kind of cool.
Like with real life, pitcher fatigue sets in after a few innings.
He's losing his stuff. Now
he's losing his stuff.
Okay, so you have to listen for those cues to know when your guy's getting tired.
Now batting. Ken Griffey Jr.
Did you hear the flare there?
Yeah.
That was cool. Like, they know he's the big timer.
On the downside, the announcer has some bad timing.
Slicing foul.
Good reaction. Like, a ball will have already landed foul, and he'll be like, it's hooking.
Right.
Foul.
The throw to home. The throw to home. A game-winning hit.
Even though Team Panda had a strong start, the Tito Raptors picked up the pace and took home the W. Here's the man himself with tonight's postgame.
So this was just an offensive explosion, despite the fact that we scored very few runs for how many hits we had. This is probably a stat line you would never see in a real baseball game.
Mm-hmm.
You batted 368, which translated to a full season would be insane, but struck out 17 times. For context, the record through a 9-inning game for strikeouts is it's just around 20.
It is indeed 20. Tito was spot on. For Game 2, we went straight to an all-star battle.
Frank Thomas.
The big hurt himself. Just another visual thing here. Like, Frank Thomas is 6'5" and 250 plus pounds. He doesn't look like it there.
No, he definitely doesn't.
He's got his big meaty legs, but
otherwise a pretty standard size human.
yeah, I'd like to see a giant man. Did that guy look like that?
No, he did not. He did not look like that. That man is huge.
It'd be interesting to look at the development history and when they got the player licenses.
Figuring out when Sega got the MLB license is a bit tricky. Taking a look at the Tronix E3 video, we get a glimpse of what World Series looked like in development back when it was called Grand Slam Baseball. They even made a cover with that title. You can see they're showing the Japanese version at the American show floor. This would be on or within a few days after May 11th, 1995, nearly 5 months before the American game hit stores. You can already see the field looks very small and plain. The announcer and voice actor are different. Player names are written out in Japanese. The first name we see is written out in katakana, an alphabet they use for Western words. The other names are written out in kanji, which, to my knowledge, is only used for Japanese words and names. So these likely are not representations of American players.
It's how you play the game.
The Saturn's E3 demo reel appears to show the same build, again with kanji player names. Only a few seconds of its footage is shown, with no game title. If we look at the finished Japanese release, names are written out in the Roman English alphabet, just as they appear in the US version. The announcer is the same. Based on the observations seen in E3's Grand Slam Baseball, along with the inaccurate portrayals of players like Frank Thomas and Randy Johnson, it would appear Sega did not get the license until sometime after May 11th. It's worth noting the back of the launch console box has an ad for World Series Baseball, but no indication of an MLB license. Would you like me to throw another wrench into the spokes of confusion? Behold, Kanzenchuke Pro Yaku Greatest 9. This Japan exclusive came out on May 26, 1995, according to this Japanese website. It's developed by the same Sega team. It's the exact same game, but with Japanese teams. Remember, it's different from the Japanese version of World Series Baseball, entitled Hideo Nomo World Series Baseball, which came out in November.
Why, I'm World Series Baseball.
What kind of fool do you take me for? He's
World Series Baseball.
He's
World Series Baseball.
You're
World Series Baseball.
I'm
World Series Baseball.
Are there any other
World Series Baseball
I should know about?
Let us recap. Greatest 9 came first. They showed it off at E3 as Grand Slam Baseball. Then they got MLB licensing and released the game as World Series Baseball in America, with American teams. Then the MLB licensed game came back to Japan about 6 weeks later as Hideo Nomo's World Series Baseball. This must have been especially confusing in 1995, since starting at around E3, World Series Baseball for the 32X, again a totally different game, was being shown off and promoted. Back to the epic all-star match.
The throw to first. The throw to first. The throw to second. The throw to third. He's safe. The throw to third.
Tito and I got really bored of it, so we stopped playing. No, we did not play a 162-game Pennant Race.
It's a fairly average game. As far as a baseball sim goes, gameplay feels solid. There's a small learning curve. The presentation leaves a little to be desired. I'm missing some of those creamy 3D graphics. Give each sprite a little more personality. Most of these sprites, they feel like, that's just a generic baseball player. Just little character things, like the idle animation. You can tell Nomo here is getting tired because he's wiping sweat off his brow. That's nice. I'd like to see more things like that.
Now, what did 1995 think about World Series Baseball? Fans were longing for baseball action in the summer and fall. Sega itself was heavily plugging the game to its fan base. As I mentioned, it was on the console box, and was one of just 3 playable demos on the bootleg sampler. They showed it off at E3 and threw a few ads in magazines, whose writers gave it good to average remarks in their reviews. EGM's December issue said it, quote, covers all the bases, adding WSB could allow Sega to, quote, regain the glory of its past baseball titles. GamePro noted, you can't trade players or create custom rosters, a major bummer for any hardcore fans looking for a long baseball league experience. Air Hendricks did like the graphics and gameplay, but also noted the difficulty with fielding. That's something Tito and I noticed. Game Players said it's the best baseball game ever made, and Game Fans writer said it was everything they hoped for. Some reported the release price to be nearly $70 at EB Games. Wow. Accounting for inflation, $70 would be about $117 in the year 2019. A fat wattadash for an average baseball game? No thanks. Some Usenet posters agreed. This guy wrote a whole article about trying to return it. In the UK, where baseball is not popular, Mean Machines and Sega Saturn magazine both gave it scores in the 80s out of 100. Now, how does it rank on the Tito baseball game rating scale?
From Combat Basketball to NBA Jam, I give this a mad 08 out of 10.
As a casual sports observer, I'm right about in line with Tito's thoughts. Home Run Derby does help break up the monotony of the regular games. Playing through them gets to be a slog. And even Tito, the 90s sports game fan, agrees. The pacing is slow. With real teams and real players, it's trying to be a baseball sim as opposed to a high-octane arcade game. Seems like it doesn't try hard enough to be fun and engaging. As our mighty guardian approached the plate, he sternly informed the coach he doesn't need a bat. Chairman Sega is the bat. World Series Baseball is not the bat. If you're looking for Saturn's best baseball game, World Series Baseball is not your Diamond Maiden. If you're looking for a fun baseball game to remind you of the 90s sports era, the lack of detail and sometimes inaccurate presentation strikes out. World Series Baseball is a couple base runs ahead of terrible, but stays stuck on the lower end of good.
I don't give a shit about baseball.
They've got storms. Even beasts.
Right where those mutants belong.
In a can. New from Chef Boyardee, all your favorite X-Men in pasta shapes and excellent sauce. We got 'em, and only you can set them free.
Who do you think you are? I am.